All right, good afternoon. My name is Michael Bugis. I'm a third year here at the university. And before we get started today, I'm going to have the team introduce themselves.
I'm Ariana Parsons. I'm a fourth year.
My name is Rachel Boots, and I'm a third year.
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Allen. I'm also third year.
So this past summer, we had an opportunity to travel to rural South Africa on a seventh-week community development project, focusing on assessing energy needs in rural South Africa. And before we get into the project, we're going to take you to where we worked.
We worked in the Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces in the northeast part of the country, and the specific communities that we were working with were chosen because they all had pre-established relationships with UVA. The genesis of our project comes from a UVA professor's long-standing relationship with Mashamba Presidential Primary School in Limpopo. The school expressed a need for a cleaner and more efficient method of cooking to use when making meals for their 800 students. At the time, they were using traditional open fires like you see here, and these fires use a lot of wood, which contributes to deforestation and also places a financial burden on the school. The open and uncontained nature of the flame also has other implications like pollution, burns, and respiratory illnesses. Our project is actually the continuation of a previous JPC initiative, EcoVision. 3 years ago, a team of UVA students traveled to Mashamba and collaborated with the local community to produce a rocket stove design like you see here. A rocket stove is a high-efficiency wood-burning stove, and some of its benefits include reduced wood consumption, reduced smoke emissions, reduced cooking time, and a lower incidence of burns and respiratory illnesses. The design here was modified from a traditional rocket stove design to be more culturally competent. It uses local resources and expertise so that it's easily replicable, and was adapted so that it meshes with the traditional methods of cooking.
So 2 years out from the EcoVision project, our goal here, our research question was to really analyze the financial, social, and environmental impacts that the rocket stoves were having on these schools and communities in rural South Africa. And we did that through three main goals. One, like I said, to assess through quantitative and qualitative metrics. Quantitatively, we really used informal interviews with cooks, with professors, with teachers in these schools, with local community members as well. And quantitatively, we looked at wood-burning techniques that the schools were using. We looked at financial records. We did mass balance with the wood that each of the stoves were using as well. Secondly, we worked with entrepreneurs. We wanted to really facilitate the discussion of this stove within the community, working with local knowledge, local expertise. And finally, we wanted to facilitate a discussion about the rocket stoves to help spread this technology throughout the region, which we're going to get into a little bit.
So now that we've given you an overview of the project, where we were, and some of our goals, we're going to start from the beginning. Right after receiving approval from Jefferson Public Citizens. Our first step was to meet with the past professor and the past team, EcoVision, pick their brains for everything they learned. We were in the same community, working with the same community partners, which was a really key cog in our project. And once we were able to contact them with phone calls and emails, set up all the logistics, everyone get on the same page, we actually went out to Crozet and built what you see here, which is a modified rocket stove, basically half the dimensions of a normal one. And this was just get us experience with building the rocket stoves and cultivate us with how the team should work in building these, because the community partners had already built multiple of these already. So getting everyone on the same page. Listed some of the community partners, some of the highlights here. Maybe the reason why we chose these community partners, most of them had already been part of the EcoVision project. The Global Sustainability Club at the University of Venda was our primary contact. We had a student in this club travel with us through multiple regions, and he brought this back to the club at Venda. The East Savannah program was also instrumental in helping us to maintain relationships that had existed prior to our project. We have a couple primary schools where we built stoves, and also a science center, which was a new dynamic to the project. The science center attracts different schools from all across the region and gives them lab instructions they might not have at their school. So not only was the stove used for cooking, but also as a lab demonstration project.
So the first phase of our project, once we arrived in South Africa, was to do the assessment of the pre-existing stoves. And so that assessment, through quantitative and qualitative metrics, really showed us what an impact they had. The first and most important, I guess, impact was a 50% reduction in wood consumption. And that huge reduction was a huge financial and environmental impact on the region. For example, one school, Mashamba, they used the saved money that they were saving by buying less wood for the stoves to expand their garden, and that allowed them to produce vegetables to supplement the children's diets. Additionally, we observed a huge decrease in the smoke that was being emitted from the open fires. With the rocket stove, there's complete combustion, so there's not as much smoke, and also there's a chimney that allows all the smoke to be directed out of the kitchen so it doesn't interfere with the cooks and the students. Furthermore, through this assessment, we tried to identify any issues or kind of get the thoughts of what the cooks thought of the stoves. And overall, they had positive thoughts on the stoves, but as you can see in the bottom right, the cooks were too short to reach into the stoves. And so we had to work with them to kind of design and solve this issue, and we ended up building steps on all the stoves to prevent them from standing on broken chairs or crates, which was dangerous. The second phase of our project was the implementation and dissemination of this rocket stove technology. So the implementation is when we worked with two local entrepreneurs, one from Mpumalanga and one from Limpopo, so that they would be able to learn this new technology, learn how to build the rocket stove, and spread it even without us being there. It was more for them to learn this new skill, a new marketable trait. And we were able to build 6 while we were in South Africa. But a more important kind of takeaway from our project was the dissemination of the rocket stove technology. There was a lot of interest in the technology, and the spread and dissemination is really community driven. At Mashamba, they had a goodbye ceremony for us, at which the COSI, who serves as the chief for the region, came to observe and learn about the stoves. He also invited and encouraged all the surrounding schools' principals to come and learn about the stoves. And through this, we can see how the stoves generated interest, and it was really spreading through community networks, and we were merely there to facilitate. These 4 pictures show you how the stove works. There's an inner chamber, which is where the fuel combustion takes place. It allows for complete combustion and very efficient cooking. The outer chamber serves as insulation, which is like this part filled with clay and ash, and allows for the heat to be retained, which is lost in the open fire cooking method, and allows for more efficient cooking. And then the chimney, as I mentioned earlier, redirects all the smoke out of the kitchen. The design of the rocket stove is very, very sustainable because all the materials and expertise needed to create it can be found locally. And the total cost is from 2,000 to 3,000 Rand, which is equivalent of $250 to $375 US.
We do recognize some limitations from our project that we've outlined. One of the biggest ones was time constraints, being 7 weeks. Traveling to a different country also doesn't give you enough time to do maybe all that you would want to do. Logistics, we had one vehicle and a lot of community partners. Keeping everyone on the same page sometimes presented a little bit of logistical difficulty, but nothing we couldn't work around. And then finally, kind of post-project, maintaining the relationships. Being overseas is sometimes difficult to maintain that collaboration that we had on the ground. To continue that forward is something we have to press on with and really work towards. Sustainability, kind of a big takeaway from our project that we've kind of been emphasizing, is this idea of a resilient system. The partnerships we've created, both institutional and community, are still working together on the ground in South Africa. Like Rachel mentioned, it wasn't just us there, it was them taking the idea and really going with it. That transfer of knowledge, we thought the use of social entrepreneurs was really key as well, as they can try and create value. They are creating value from these stoves, and in the process, working with communities that they live and work in.
So upon reflection of our project, we really wanted to ask, what were the ways forward? What is the direction forward with this project? And first and foremost, improve metrics to really kind of get better quantitative metrics of the stoves, working with institutions, whether that be universities around the region, to really help kind of improve these metrics. Additionally, proliferation throughout the region is something that, like we've talked about earlier, has really been community driven. And as it continues to do that, we kind of want to help facilitate that dialogue about the stoves itself. And something that's greater than kind of the tangible object of the stove is what these stoves have done, is through curriculum development. Like Nick had touched on earlier, these stoves have been used as a teaching model for students throughout the region who don't have labs within their schools. So this is kind of more than the actual tangible impacts of the stoves, as well as these growths of networks of relationships. And finally, for conclusions, we really wanted to take a look when we went into the community at really using participatory research. When we got there, we realized that really the assets within the community were what drove this project and made it sustainable. Whether that be ideas, whether that be local resources, local knowledge, really kind of made this resilient system through community development, which has made, like I said, this stove design so popular within the region today. Coming in to the schools, to the region in which we worked, we really thought that we kind of might be viewed as strangers in a strange land. However, what we found were that the network of relationships that we found based off respect, relationships, reciprocity, were something that were mutual and kind of made us leave the community as friends, and today continuing to maintain contact are some of the main takeaways that we found with our project.